Hello and welcome. I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. US President Donald Trump has met for a second time in 2 days with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, discussing a potential Gaza ceasefire deal. Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff says Israel and Hamas are closing their differences when coming to a potential deal. Well, President Trump has also criticised the Russian president, stating he is not happy with Putin, while also saying he was considering steep Russian sanctions. The US leader also said he'd approved the sending of defensive weapons to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Trump also announces that the US will impose a new 50% copper tariff with a pharmacy levy that may reach 200%. Trump says BRICS nations are getting a 10% rate pretty soon, while the president also praises discussions with China. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says that authorities are searching for more than 180 people who were unaccounted for 4 days after devastating deadly flash flooding. The death toll has now risen to at least 110. France's Interior Minister says that at least 110 people have been injured after wildfires broke out in Marseille. While officials say the blaze is considered to be under control, hot and windy conditions are forecast throughout the week. The US Supreme Court has cleared the way for the Trump administration to pursue mass federal job cuts. In a brief, unsigned order, the court says Trump was likely to succeed in his argument after a lower court blocked the layoffs. Elon Musk says exposing a supposed file on Jeffrey Epstein is his new political party's top priority. It comes as Trump says that Musk's third-party threat will help us. And former South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol is set to appear in court where special prosecutors will consider a request for his detention. This comes amid a probe over Yoon's short-lived martial law imposition. Well, we start this hour in North America, and US President Donald Trump has announced a 50% tariff on copper imports and warned that pharmaceuticals could face a 200% levy within a year. He says a formal announcement on drug tariffs is coming soon. Semiconductor tariffs are also in the pipeline. Trump confirmed a 10% charge is coming for BRICS countries. On Truth Social, he said details on trade actions involving at least 7 countries will be released tomorrow. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says the US has collected $100 billion in tariffs so far and expects that figure to triple to $300 billion by the year's end. Trump says these tariffs will protect American jobs and industries. Let's have a look at what the US president said.
Things into the country, they're going to be tariffed at a very, very high rate, like 200%. We'll give them a certain period of time to get their act together, but they were all here. So we're going to be announcing pharmaceuticals, chips, and various couple of other things, big ones. We did steel, as you know, they're 50%. We did aluminum, 50%. Lumber just came out. That's copper. And we did cars. And now...
Well, joining us to discuss these further announcements surrounding tariffs by Donald Trump is Andrew KP Leung, a China strategist who's joining us from London. Andrew, as always, thank you for being here. Let's have a look at these statements by Trump. A new copper tariff, a potential farmer tariff of up to 200%, also a 10% base levy on BRICS countries. Trump not stepping back on his ambitions towards trade and imbalances that he sees. How do you think the global markets will react to this?
Has been Trump's mantra all along since he entered the White House, even at the first time at the Trump 1.0. He already touts himself as a tariff man. He believes that he could weaponize the United States' position as the largest economy in the world, and of course is a high wealth country and also a military dominant power, course, the supremacy of the US dollar. So it's recognizing all this in order to gather more revenue, for example, the tariff revenue just highlighted, and also trying to bring jobs back to the United States. However, things are not that simple because the high tariffs, in so-called tariff revenue collected by the state, actually is translating itself into higher costs for the consumers because the no countries, no importers are going to lose money. If they lose money, they simply won't ship the goods to the United States. As simple as that. Then how are they going to make money is, of course, by increasing prices. And the prices are borne by the American consumers. The American consumers generally tend to be the lower strata of the American society, therefore exacerbating the inequality. And then secondly, it's unlikely to bring back a lot of jobs because the kind of jobs which have been outsourced over the past few decades are generally low-end jobs. Some of them are quite polluting. But then the huge cost differential between the United States and the other outsourced countries is so huge that simply it won't be viable. And also the kind of skills, knowledge, just the low-end production is already been privatized. So I think that there's rhetoric. Yes, in the short term, it seems that they bring in money, but then it's laying the seeds for this disruption, if not destruction, of the American economy. Above all, it is also antagonizing Americans' closest allies in Europe, in other countries, in Southeast Asia, and even India, exception, in spite of the fact that China is now perceived as the greatest existential threat. But then Trump said he's having a good deal with China because China is now retaliating by focusing on its stranglehold of production.
Yes, I believe our signal with Andrew is weak there. While we get that sorted, let's stay on the topic of tariffs and look at certain relationships with the US, starting with China. And President Trump says that the US is getting along well with the country. He calls the trade deal fair and says he speaks frequently with President Xi. Trump describes the relationship as strong and stable, adding that China has been very fair in recent dealings. Let's hear what Trump said.
But I think we have had a really good relationship with China lately, and we're getting along with them very well. They've been very fair on our trade deal, honestly, and I hope we're going to have a great relationship. It's a big, strong, powerful country. We're more powerful than they are. We have much better military equipment than they do, but we are getting along with them very well. I'm getting along with President Xi very well. We speak often. And with all of that being said, and I understand what you're saying, but I think...
Well, Trump's rhetoric over China, of course, changing after an escalating trade war was met with diplomacy after meetings in Geneva and in London that saw triple-digit tariff rates reduced dramatically. Now it seems that Trump's relationship with China, and specifically President Xi, has improved. Talk over a potential visit for Trump and Melania to China to meet with President Xi and discuss relations between the two countries. But, of course, difficulties still remain. The issue over Taiwan is something that the US have spoken about. Of course, China seeing Taiwan as their own territory. Taiwan's president, Lai Ching-te, looking at independence in some forms, which of course has been met with discontent amongst the Chinese Communist Party. Now, I believe we are joined once again by Andrew KP Leung, who is back with us. Andrew, let's look at these relations between the US and China. They've been tumultuous over the start of Trump's second term, but this rhetoric clear from Trump saying negotiations are going well, conversations with Xi are taking place on a regular basis, and that a deal will be agreed. What's your opinion on Trump's comments?
Trump is a great negotiator, focusing on strength. And of course, he's a great manipulator of the rhetoric. Whereas he is a very, very strong position to bully many other countries. And China is now standing up to the United States by focusing on the United States' Achilles heel, which is the rare earths, which are, of course, largely controlled by China in terms of processing, even though the rare earths themselves can be found in a lot of other places. But the 90% or more processing has been done in China and developed over several decades. And these processes are very polluting, highly intricate, and each product process is different. And these are essential components, not only in mobile phones, but also in the military. For example, a fighter jet would require, some of the advanced fighter jets would require as much as like 70 pounds of this weapons. So really, this is a stranglehold of the United States. Hence, even on day one in the White House, Trump wanted to take over Greenland. Why? Because there's rare earths. And he also wanted to target the rare earths in Ukraine, hence suggesting that that's his vulnerable point, and China is exploiting that. Of course, that translates into a softer rhetoric on China.
Yes, absolutely. Andrew, if you stay with us, we're going to stick on the topic of trade, looking at those US relations, this time with the European Union. And Donald Trump says that the group of nations is moving to protect Airbus in ongoing trade talks with the United States. He adds that luxury car maker Ferrari could lose out under the new terms. Trump also confirms he's likely 2 days away from sending a formal letter to the EU on trade. The comments come amid growing tensions over tariffs and fair competition. Trump has pushed for tougher terms to balance what he calls one-sided deals with Europe. Andrew, bringing you back in, thank you for staying with us. Of course, the EU is the US's largest trading partner, and conversation over a potential deal has taken place, but it has been drawn out. Some positivity here, Trump signalling that a formal letter will be sent within the coming days. How vital is it for both the US and the EU that this deal is done quickly and can be helpful for both nations with compromises?
This really foundation, which is anchored very close relations between the United States and Europe since the end of the Second World War. The two great advanced countries, many commonalities in terms of ideology, democracy, human rights, and also the strength as the largest advanced countries in the world. But now this Atlantic Charter has now been upon.
Yes, Andrew, unfortunately we are facing network issues, but thank you ever so much for joining us and discussing trade. We, of course, will continue to bring you all of those updates as we get them, as the US looks to make those trade deals ahead of the August 1st deadline. But we now move over to Europe, and US President Donald Trump has said that he is not happy with Russian President Vladimir Putin and was considering additional sanctions on Moscow, underscoring his frustration over the growing death toll in Russia's war with Ukraine. This comes after Trump told reporters last Friday that he had a good call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and restated his disappointment at a conversation with Vladimir Putin over what he said was Moscow's lack of willingness to work towards a ceasefire. He also reiterated his approval of sending some defensive weapons to Ukraine and said that Putin is killing too many people. Trump gave these comments during a meeting with cabinet officials at the White House. Here is what the president said.
Not happy with Putin. I can tell you that much right now, because he's killing a lot of people. And a lot of them are his soldiers and their soldiers, mostly. And it's now up to 7,000 a week. And I'm not happy with Putin. We get a lot of thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
Do you want to sanction him? Lindsey Graham has a sanctions bill on Russia. Do you want him to move
I'm looking at it, yeah. No, I'm looking. The Senate is passing and passed a very, very tough sanctions bill. Yeah, I'm looking at it.
And you'd sign that?
It's an optional bill. It's totally at my option. They passed it totally at my option, and to terminate totally at my option. And
well, I just want to apologise for that language that Donald Trump used there. Of course, letting his frustrations out, clearly not happy with the current situation in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And this comes as a Ukrainian drone attack killed 3 people, including a National Guard soldier in the Russian city of Kursk. According to the region's acting governor, 7 others were wounded, including a young boy in the attack. According to reports, a Russian mayor has also said that Russia's air defence units destroyed 2 drones heading towards Moscow. Meanwhile, Governor Alexander Kinchtien has accused Ukrainian forces of an inhumane attack in which he claimed they deliberately struck a place where civilians were located. Well, joining us to discuss this ongoing conflict in Europe with wider geopolitical ramifications, Shruti Das-Gupta, a foreign affairs expert, who was joining us live from New Delhi. Shruti, thank you very much for being here. There's quite a bit for us to unpack there, but let's first look at Donald Trump's rhetoric with Vladimir Putin. I want to question why he's choosing now to have disdain for Putin and the actions he's carrying out. Sometimes we see Trump buddying up to Putin and praising him. Now he's being negative and talking about the killing that is taking place. Is this sitting on the fence that Trump's been doing in recent months, helping work towards a peace deal? Or is it a case that Trump finally has come to the conclusion that Putin doesn't actually want peace, where before he believed he did?
Greetings. Thank you so much for inviting me. For me, it's twofold, the answer to this question. First of it is that Trump is eyeing the Nobel Peace Prize, and he wants the wars resolved before the nominations can actually turn into a peace prize for him. And this, up till now, he's been tolerant of Putin and Ukraine, both in different ways. And now he wants this to end once and for all so that his personal ambitions can be fulfilled. The second part of this is he's realized that he's butting head with a man who stands equal. Putin will not bow like other nations have before him. And he wants to ensure that he has enough political capital by sending more missiles and being more strong-headed about it, and trying to bluff his way into ensuring that Putin comes to the talking table and ensures that the war comes to an end. So for him, it is a political showdown as well of power, as well as a personal showdown for his gratification and attempts to gain a peace prize.
Yeah, Shruti, of course, questions have been raised by Western allies of Ukraine as to whether Vladimir Putin actually wants peace. Experts we've spoken to on this programme, also experts who are following this war, say that while Vladimir Putin's forces seem to be moving forward, that there's no incentive for Putin to look towards a peace deal. Do you think pressure in the form of sanctions from the US, as mentioned by Trump again overnight, could push Putin towards a potential ceasefire deal? Or as the situation continues to evolve, do you think there is going to be a different outcome in these negotiations?
About a month ago, when the G7 was happening, the talk of sanctions started to crop up again. And at that time, Trump was very firm on the stance that sanctions leads to cost not just to the people who it is applied to, but who it is applied by. So when US issues sanctions on any nation, then the US suffers as well, because they have to find alternate means, probably more expensive, of satisfying their very economic and commercial needs. So sanctions is always never his goal, but it is a form of trying to limit Putin's access to funds as well as trade, and try and ensure that the money that is keeping the war economy of Russia afloat comes to a stop, and then because of local inflation in Russia that these sanctions would increase, then Putin might be forced as a leader of his people to agree to what Trump and the rest of the West wants. So sanctions are a way to try and push to Putin to the table, Russia to the table, but they may not be effective until and unless the US and the West are ready to take on the brunt of those sanctions for themselves as well.
Yes, absolutely, Shruti. If you stay with us, we are going to continue on the Russia-Ukraine war, and we're going to look at the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who said that Kyiv will intensify talks with the United States on air defence support. This comes after President Trump confirmed Washington will send more defensive weapons to Ukraine. Zelensky has ordered his defence minister to expand contacts with US officials immediately. Air defence remains a top priority as Russia continues to step up strikes. Zelensky says rapid implementation of US decisions is crucial. The Pentagon also confirmed new deliveries are underway. Both sides now look to strengthen military coordination amid ongoing efforts for lasting peace. Let's listen once again to US President Donald Trump.
Сьогодні ж доручив міністру оборони України та головкому активізувати всі контакти з американською стороною. Ми маємо зараз необхідні політичні заяви та рішення, і потрібно їх.
Well, that, of course, wasn't US President Donald Trump. That was Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron reaffirmed Europe's unwavering support for Ukraine during his address to UK lawmakers in London. Speaking on the first day of his state visit, Macron underscored the importance of unity among European allies in defending Ukraine's sovereignty amid ongoing Russian aggression. This is what the French president had to say.
This is why, together with you, Mr. Prime Minister, we decided to launch last February this coalition of the willing you mentioned. And this coalition was just the signal that the Europeans will never abandon Ukraine, never.
Well, joining us once again to discuss these comments that have been made, Shruti Das Gupta. Shruti, let's first look at Volodymyr Zelensky and his comments, looking at these defensive missile systems, the Patriot systems, which the US said was in short supply of. They had less than 1,000 rounds of this ammunition, but Donald Trump has changed that stance after Hegseth and the Pentagon paused some deliveries. Why is it so significant for Ukraine to have these US-made defence systems in the face of attacks on civilian infrastructure?
The Patriot missile defense system is going to help them block the ballistic missiles that Moscow is likely to launch in their quest for aggression and increased dominance in the region. And this is the only system that they know that Ukraine can have access to. But coming back to your earlier comment that US stockpile of Patriot missile systems is down to 25% of what it should actually be. So US is not going to send it directly. Let me go back to the series of phone calls that happened last week. Before Trump spoke to Zelensky, he spoke to the German authorities, and thereafter he spoke with Zelensky and he pledged a larger defensive backing for Ukraine. And Zelensky himself spoke to the German authorities and he was very happy. So what I conclude from all of these phone calls and the actions and words that are being said is there is a battery of the Patriot missile systems that are there with Germany, and they might be loaned to Ukraine to protect itself when its civilian infrastructure, energy, generating structures as well as important facilities are under attack. So Zelensky is obviously very happy with it, and this will put a significant amount of pressure on Russia to come down to either bear brass tacks of hitting as hard as they can, wherever they can, rather than just targeted systems and important infrastructures, or come back to the talking table and try and resolve this faster so that this 3-year war comes to an end in a way that is acceptable to all parties.
Yes, and Shruti, before we move on, of course, French President Emmanuel Macron, who is in the United Kingdom at the moment, talking about continued support from European nations, Western European nations. How do you think a united coalition of the willing and united Western allies of Ukraine could support not just Ukraine's defence against Russia, but also a potential move towards a ceasefire, something that they have been calling for persistently in recent months?
The other nations of Europe under this coalition actively start engaging with Russian troops, then you have World War III on your hands, because now it will not be just two nations fighting, it will be many nations fighting amongst each other, and it will turn into a very murky situation where the right from wrong will no longer be as visible as it is today. So I believe we should understand why the war began, which was the NATO installations in Ukraine, which was not acceptable to Russia and had warned against repeatedly to the U.S. And NATO and the other European nations were in support of NATO installations. If we look at it in parallels with the Israeli and Iran war, Israel's attack on Iran was justified because it was a threat to its sovereignty. Iran's nuclear ammunition was a threat to its sovereignty, and the West supported it. Now, Russia's attack on Ukraine is not supported by the West, even though the NATO installations, proposed NATO installation and alignment, would have led to a threat to Russia's sovereignty. So there is a dual standards at play here, and if the coalition starts to join in terms of military force and not just aid, it will turn into a very bad situation, forcing the entire world into choosing a side and a global phenomena of World War III.
Yes, Shruti, just very quickly off the back of that, I want to pick up on your statement talking about countries choosing a side and a potential further escalation. Is that not already the case, given the fact that Russia is allied with certain nations, and we know the coalition of the willing with Western powers, and building off of that, if there is troop involvement from other countries, like we're seeing with North Koreans in fighting with Russia against Ukrainians, how could that escalate this conflict and bring in other nations?
That is a very, very important question. You see, the minute European forces start, right now they're just fortifying their borders to ensure that Russian aggression doesn't spill into their own regions. But if these forces start acting from those very borders towards Russia, that is where the escalation turns into a global phenomena and a World War III situation. The North Korean forces that have been loaned to Russia to fight are fighting from Russia to Ukraine. The war doesn't spill out beyond these two borders. But if these particular nations beyond aid start doing it, it will turn into a groupism of sort, which will de facto show that other Western powers are ready to engage in a more horrific fashion that is not good for the world.
Shruti Dasgupta, thank you ever so much for providing your insight on an ongoing war that we will continue to cover here on NewsX World. But from a European conflict to one taking place in the Middle East, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his latest meeting with US President Donald Trump centred on securing the release of hostages still held in Gaza. Trump confirmed the two met again at the White House on Tuesday evening, with Gaza and regional stability topping the agenda. Netanyahu also highlighted what he called a great victory over Iran and its broader implications. This comes as a Qatari delegation arrived on Tuesday for talks at the White House regarding the hostage deal and ceasefire in Gaza. Trump says Netanyahu wants to get it solved. Let's listen in once again to the US president.
And I think he's been treated very unfairly, but he's coming over later. We're going to be talking about, I would say, almost exclusively Gaza. We got to get that solved. Gaza is a tragedy. It's a tragedy. And he wants to get it solved, and I want to get it solved. And I think the other side wants to get it solved.
Well, joining us to discuss this topic and the wider ramifications, Dr. Satoru Nagao, a fellow at the Hudson Institute. Joining us from Tokyo, Japan, Dr. Nagao, as always, thank you for your time. Let's look at the significance of, firstly, this alliance between the US and Israel. We've mentioned Gaza, of course, a topic we will continue to discuss on this programme, but also Trump mentioning success in Iran as well. Two pillars here, the United States and Israel. Of course, Israel, the dominant force within the region of their borders, but also the US with their military might. How significant is that relationship moving forward in a region, the Middle East, that is currently facing extreme instability and insecurity around potential conflict?
In case of the Gaza, the U.S. suggestion to ceasefire hasn't changed for a long time. Mainly based on for the half of the hostage released 60 days ceasefire. But the situation of for the negotiation has changed. Hamas is losing the cards currently. For example, in the past, Hamas has support from Iran, but Iran is losing the influence now. And Hamas also is losing the card to deliver the food to the, control the food delivered to the people. But now the US NGOs escorted by the Israel forces start to deliver the food. This means that Hamas cannot control this material. So this means that when the negotiation has happened for the ceasefire, Hamas is losing cards. That is the current situation. That's why this demand prepared by US and Israel, despite the contents are similar with the last time, but this is more powerful. The problem is the Israel side and the Hamas side. When we check the demand of the both sides, this is zero-sum. Israel side cannot allow Hamas to survive because they are terrorists, and if they survive, this will be the potential to the next terrorism against Israel. And in case of the Hamas need to survive. So Hamas need to survive is a situation Israel cannot accept. This means that this is a zero-sum situation. Zero or sum is the choice. So in this case, how to achieve the agreement between two is very difficult negotiation. Even if the U.S. prepare this, and indeed, this is not easy to achieve the agreement between two, I think.
Yes, Dr. Nagao, if you stay with us, we're going to continue with Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to the United States. The Israeli Prime Minister has also met with Vice President J.D. Vance at the White House. The talks centred around the ongoing negotiations with Hamas and efforts towards securing a ceasefire. Netanyahu highlighted the importance of US support in achieving a long-term resolution to the conflict in Gaza. He addressed the counter-proposal from Hamas, calling for increased humanitarian aid to Gaza. Let's listen in.
The Hamas counter-proposal to allow more widespread aid.
We accepted a proposal that came from the mediators. It's a good proposal. It matches Steve Witkoff's original idea. And we think that we've gotten closer to it, and I hope we can cross the line. That is our purpose. But I think the less I speak about it publicly, the more likely that we might get it.
Well, Netanyahu also met with US House Speaker Mike Johnson during his Washington trip. The discussion focused on strengthening US-Israel ties and securing bipartisan support for Israel's security needs. Both leaders emphasised the need for continued cooperation on the Gaza crisis and regional stability. Dr. Nagao, thank you for staying with us. We've heard there from Benjamin Netanyahu looking at this Gaza ceasefire deal. Of course, mediators involved, discussions taking place, and US Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, who made an initial proposal similar to the one that mediators have presented to Hamas, him saying that the difference between Israel and Hamas is getting closer. Is that optimism, do you think, going to manifest into a concrete deal? We've been in this position before, but there are clear differences. So how close do you think we are really to a ceasefire deal?
It's how to close is very difficult in this case because of the zero-sum situation I explained. But even if in such kind of situation, negotiation is only to seek the ceasefire, that's true. And at the same time, this kind of attitude to arrange the ceasefire will affect the U.S. influence in the Middle East. U.S. Strategy is arrangement between Israel and Saudi Arabia to be the tag against Iran, and the U.S. want to withdraw from the Middle East and concentrate their effort to the Indo-Pacific against China. So, view from such kinds of the long-term strategy, how to persuade the Sunni Arab country is the key. So, including Saudi Arabia, with Jordan, the UAE, these countries. So that's why the U.S. should arrange the ceasefire negotiation, even if it is difficult. So that attitude itself is meaningful. So that's why this hostage deal, temporary ceasefire they are seeking, even if under the tough situation to conclude, if this is temporary ceasefire, that's why it is negotiable. And so U.S. is seeking and arranging this to find a way and showing such attitude itself is meaningful to persuade other Sunni Arab countries. But that is the reason he is seeking, I believe.
Yes, stay with us, Dr. Nagal, because we have further updates from the Middle East, and the Israeli army has vowed to press ahead with its assault on Beit Hanoun in northern Gaza. Forces have encircled the area, targeting a reported militant stronghold above and below the ground. This comes after 5 Israeli soldiers were killed in intense fighting, marking one of the deadliest days for the Israeli military this year. Officials say the town contains numerous tunnels used by Hamas and poses a direct threat to border communities. Troops continue to face heavy resistance as operations intensify. The military says the campaign will not stop until the threat is fully neutralized. Let's see what the person has said on the matter.
ביציאה להתקפה, בשעת לילה, הכוח נע באופן רגלי לצד טנקים וכלים נוספים. הכוח יתקדם ויפתח את הכלים מאיומים שונים במרחב. מהתחקיר עולה כי הכוח נפגע מ3 מטענים שהופעלו בטווח של דקות. לאחר פיצוץ המטען הראשון והדיווח הראשוני, הוקפץ כוח לחילוצם. במהלך הפינוי, הכוח נתקל באש שנפתחה לעברו ופצעה חלק מהלוחמים. הכוח המשיך בלחימה ובפינוי תחת אש.
Well, yes, this, of course, coming as Israeli military operations continue. The situation on the ground is difficult. Hostages still being held by Hamas, but of course calls over aid, access, humanitarian crises which are ongoing, potentially, of course, a difficult situation to circumnavigate for the Israeli army as they continue their offensive. Dr. Nagal, thank you for staying with us. I do just want to look at the situation on the ground. Israel's army saying that they have located a stronghold within northern Gaza and are encircling it. We know that many people have been displaced. Many Palestinians have been displaced into the north of Gaza after Israel stepped up their attacks. How important is it to consider the significance of human life when Israel is carrying out these military assaults on Hamas? Of course, tens of thousands of deaths reported by the Gaza-run health ministry. A humanitarian situation on the ground that charities and aid groups say is a famine. We've also got situations with hostages being held. It's extremely difficult on a humanitarian aspect. What responsibility does the Israeli military have to try and limit the killings of their forces, but also of civilians?
View from the military aspect, this is the typical counter-insurgency operation. because in the past, Israel sees Gaza and airstrike has happened, the ground troop enter, but they did not try to occupy and control the area and eliminate house by house, and eliminate Hamas. Such kind of operation hasn't continued for a long time. So temporarily they enter and attack Hamas, but withdraw. And temporarily attack Hamas, something like that. This has repeated. But now they try to enter the Gaza, and from the north, one by one they check, then they eliminate Hamas, and pushing Hamas to the south. This is typical counterinsurgency operation. View from the last 1 year, attacking the Hamas itself is not enough to eliminate all of the Hamas Hamas terrorists. So that's why it is logical Israel try to check one by one houses and stay that place for a long time. But such kind of operation, view from the historical example of the counterinsurgency operation, such kind of operation has the risk too. So because the Israel soldier is staying that places, it could be the target for the Hamas retaliation attack, so Hamas resistance. So that's why there is a risk for Israel side to continue this operation, but Israel decide to do it is view from the historical example of the counterinsurgency operation. This is the typical and logical. The view from this, if this operation continue, of course, Israel casualty will increase, and at the same time, the people staying in that place is also suffer the collateral damages. So that's why this operation itself has a huge risk, but it has decided to do that. Means that this is the final phase of the counterinsurgency operation. One by one, it will continue. And ask Hamas what you can do, or surrender, or fight and that. Something like that is typical one, I believe, the view from the other example of the counterinsurgency operation.
Yes, Dr. Satoru Nagao, thank you ever so much for joining us on the programme. We will continue to bring you all the developments in Gaza and across the Middle East. But we move on now, and US President Donald Trump has said that former Doge chief Elon Musk's planned America Party will help him. This comes more than a month after their initial social media bust up. Musk announced the formation of a new US political party in response to US President Donald Trump signing in his sweeping tax and spending bill into law. Trump had earlier criticised the new party's announcement, calling it ridiculous, while Musk, once a close ally of the president and a huge donor during the president's election campaign, said the party would aim to unseat the Republican lawmakers in Congress who backed the bill in next year's midterm elections. Here is what was said.
It'll probably help. Third parties have always been good for me. I don't know about Republicans, but for me.
Well, joining us to discuss this latest development in a relationship that has been strained after prospering and leading Donald Trump towards many of his goals and aims, Ambassador Suresh Goel, former Indian diplomat, who is joining us from New Delhi. Thank you for your time, Ambassador Goel. How do you think Trump's rhetoric is going to be received by Elon Musk? Do you think that Trump's playing a game here after criticising Elon Musk's move, now saying that it will help them? Or is this looking at potential voter share and votes that may be taken away from the opposition?
Thomas, I'm sorry, but do excuse me if I use a bit of a levity in describing what I see in front of me. The argumentation and the fight between Trump and Musk really reminds me of the street fight between two spoiled children, brats, fighting over a toy, fighting over something which the other has taken, etc., etc. Both Elon Musk and Donald Trump are so highly transactional. Even when they came together before the elections, it was one of the channels here when I said, you never know how durable this kind of a friendship is going to be. And I don't think this is a real friendship. This is just a kind of coming together of two minds who may have some objective in mind, then they go their own way. But Trump will never, ever accept anyone to question him personally. And Elon Musk has questioned him personally, and therefore the Trump's reactions. I don't think at the moment the party formed by Elon Musk poses any serious disruptions in the American political system. The two-party system is far too well entrenched. People actually declare their affiliation, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, even before they go to the vote. And I think in this process, if you remember that at one time, there was another party, the far rightist party which came, I forget the name at the moment, which tried to make a place for it in the American system. They could not. They didn't succeed. I don't think in this case also, this is going to work out. But what may happen is that this kind of a political game may bring some kind of a ceasefire or truce between Trump and Musk.
Yes, absolutely. Ambassador Goel, stay with us because we're going to stay in the United States, where President Donald Trump has called for Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell to resign immediately, accusing him of misleading Congress about costly renovations at the Fed's headquarters. Speaking at a cabinet meeting, Trump criticised Powell. Let's listen into those comments.
Jerome Powell, who you've been pressuring to lower interest rates, he's facing accusations of lying to Congress, which is a potential crime about the opulent.
Well, then he should resign immediately. We should get somebody in there that's going to lower interest rates.
Do you want congressional
Why don't you
Republicans
call
to
for
look
his
into
resignation?
that? Do you want congressional Republicans to investigate and
It's
pursue
okay
and
with
punish?
me. I think he's terrible. I think, look, we're paying, I call him Too Late. T-O-O, Too Late, like Too Tall Jones for the Dallas Cowboys, right? Too late. He's always late. But he wasn't late with Biden before the election. He was cutting him like crazy. It didn't help too much, did it? But he was cutting him like crazy before the election with Kamala and Biden. He was trying to get them in, I guess. I don't know. He was recommending.
Well, Trump has long been dissatisfied with the Fed's decision to keep interest rates steady and has hinted at appointing someone who would lower borrowing costs if he returned to office. Powell, however, has denied the accusations regarding the renovations. Well, Ambassador Goel, thank you for staying with us. It's public knowledge that Trump has been looking at a potential successor here. This a further public show of disdain for the Federal Reserve leader. What's your opinion on this situation?
Trump has his own notions about monetary policies in tune with what he thinks his economic policy should be achieving. The tariffs that he has been actually going on and off about has created so much of volatility in the American financial markets and even international financial markets that Powell has had to play a very, very safe kind of a game in the whole process. And I don't think he is out to really lower the interest rates at the moment, which has rubbed Trump the wrong way. Trump has been wanting him to lower the interest rates, so more liquidity in the market, more taxation. Unfortunately, he's not able to do anything till Powell's term gets over really in 2026. So he will have to live with it, but this argumentation will again continue. He will try and get rid of Powell as soon as he can, but let us see. I don't think that kind of a situation will arise, and Powell will be a good control over Trump's monetary aspirations, so to say.
Yes, Ambassador Goel, if you stay with us, again, we're staying in the United States, where the Supreme Court has reportedly cleared the way for Donald Trump's administration to pursue mass government job cuts and the sweeping downsizing of numerous agencies. Extending a winning streak for the US president, the Supreme Court's decision on July 8th lifted San Francisco-based US District Judge Susan Ilston's order in May that had temporarily blocked large-scale federal layoffs while the case proceeded. Trump had issued an executive order in February ordering agencies to prepare for mass layoffs. At Trump's direction, the administration has come up with plans to reduce staff at the U.S. Departments of Agriculture, Commerce, Health and Human Services, State, Treasury, Veterans Affairs and more than a dozen other agencies. In its brief, unsigned order, the Supreme Court has said that Trump's administration is likely to succeed in its argument that the executive order and a memorandum implementing his order were lawful. The court said it was not assessing the legality of any specific plans for layoffs at federal agencies. Well, Ambassador Goel, thank you ever so much for sticking with us. Another win for Trump in the courts. Of course, his cost cutting, his slashing of jobs and mass layoffs in federal companies has been questioned politically, but also legally. This is another win for Trump. How significant is this as he continues to push through his aims and ambitions that he set out during his campaign and early days of his second term?
I think it's a temporary reprieve for Trump policies on layoffs and sizing down the federal departments. I will not comment on the legal aspect of it. The case has been actually adjudicated by the Supreme Court, and therefore I do hope that as far as this particular case is concerned, this is the final say, even though even the Supreme Court decision can be challenged by people through the Senate, etc., etc. My sense is that even though in this particular case, Supreme Court has given a reprieve to Trump, but as Trump moves along with his policies of sizing down federal department, we know that in terms of the meteorological department, where there were substantial cutoffs, which actually many people believe led to what happened in Texas because there was no early warning because of the cut down in the meteorological department. So I do think that people will not stop going to the court even after this order. And Trump will have to continue fighting this order. There are so many departments involved, meteorological, education, health, you name it. And American people cannot give up on this kind of state welfare or interventionist instruments. So let us see what happens, but I think it's not the end of the matter.
Yes, Ambassador Suresh Goel, thank you ever so much for joining us to discuss the political stories from the United States. We do stay in North America as the death toll from catastrophic flash floods in Kerr County, Texas, have climbed to at least 110. Governor Greg Abbott says over 180 people remain missing across the state. This with 161 unaccounted for in Kerr County alone. Search and rescue efforts are ongoing, but officials say conditions are extremely difficult. Crews are sifting through massive debris fields with help from canine teams and international responders from Mexico. This marks the deadliest freshwater flooding event in Texas in over a century. According to reports, President Donald Trump will visit flood-hit areas this Friday. Governor Abbott says the state will not rest until everyone is found. Let's listen to a statement from the governor about the rescue efforts.
Know this, we will not stop until every missing person is accounted for. Know this also, there very likely could be more added to that list. One way that we were able to expand the list of those who are missing is because family members, friends, neighbors, etc. begin calling in and reporting.
We will, of course, bring you all the updates as those search and rescue efforts continue. But now let's have a look at the latest from the business world. US used car prices surged in June, marking the largest annual increase in nearly 3 years. The Manheim Used Vehicle Value Index rose 6.3% from a year earlier, driven by market volatility linked to tariffs imposed by President Trump. His 25% tariff on imported autos spurred a surge in new vehicle purchases, though sales have since dropped. This has led to tight supply in both new and used cars, helping to sustain higher prices. Despite inflation concerns, the Federal Reserve remains cautious about rate cuts due to ongoing price pressures in the auto market. Elon Musk's launch of the America Party aimed at attracting disaffected Democrats and Republicans faces steep challenges. Experts say breaking the US's two-party system is extremely difficult, with significant resources and long-term commitment required. While Musk has money to fuel the efforts, past attempts by billionaires like Michael Bloomberg have failed, underscoring the difficulty of creating a viable third party. Additionally, Musk's appeal overlaps heavily with the existing Republican base, limiting his party's potential impact. His unpopularity with the general public further complicates his political aspirations. Meta Platforms has acquired a near 3% stake in Luxottica, the parent company of Ray-Ban, worth around €3 billion. This investment signals Meta's deepening focus on wearable technology, particularly AI-powered devices. Meta's recent partnership with Oakley to create smart glasses with AI capabilities highlights this strategy, following the success of the Ray-Ban Meta glasses. The new Oakley Meta HSTN smart glasses feature hand-free cameras, open-ear speakers and water resistance. Meta plans to gradually increase its stake in Luxottica to about 5%, reinforcing its presence in the growing wearable tech market as the company wraps up its AI infrastructure. Gold ETFs experienced their largest inflow in 5 years during the first half of 2025, with $38 billion added and a total of 397.1 metric tons, bringing holdings to 3,615.9 tons. This follows a surge in gold prices, up 26% in 2025, reaching around $3,500 per ounce. US-listed funds led the inflows, while Asian investors contributed significantly, despite holding a smaller share of assets. The growth is attributed to global political and economic instability, especially trade tensions. SolarRig's €300 million investment in biomethane plants in Italy underscores the growing shift towards sustainable energy sources. The company plans to build over 20 plants, producing 90 million cubic meters annually, enough to supply energy to 360,000 households. This move aligns with SolarRig's goal to establish biomethane as a key strategic pillar alongside renewable energy projects like solar power. Biomethane derived from organic waste is increasingly seen as a valuable energy solution in Europe's transition to cleaner sources. Well, that is all we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news from across the world.